Some encounters arrive quietly, with no announcement, no thunder, just a small voice and a simple truth. Welcome, my beautiful family. This is another story that is sure to leave your heart melt. Please do well to subscribe, like and comment where you are watching from. Now, let's begin. Adam Whitaker had spent 52 years building walls. He'd constructed them from contracts and closing statements, from 14-hour workdays, and the convenient belief that success required sacrifice. He'd climbed higher than most people dreamed, and somehow ended up alone at the top, wondering why the view felt so empty. Then, on an ordinary Thursday afternoon, in a cafe that smelled of coffee and rain, a little girl with bright eyes and brave hope walked up to his table and said the words that would crack those walls wide open. "Mom said you're my real dad." And just like that, Adam learned that the most important journeys don't begin with a plan. They begin with a child's courage and a question you never knew you needed to answer. For a moment, he couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only stare at this small person who'd just detonated his entire carefully constructed reality with 7 words. She tilted her head, studying him the way children study things they're trying to understand. "Are you okay, mister?" Adam's throat worked, but nothing came out at first. When had someone last looked at him and asked that question without wanting something in return? His voice came out rougher than he intended. I'm not sure." "You look surprised." She said this matter-of-factly, as if she'd expected exactly this reaction. Then, without invitation, she climbed into the seat across from him, her small legs dangling well above the floor. She set the napkin-wrapped cookie on the table between them like a peace offering. "My name's Mary," she said. "What's yours?" "Adam." The word came automatically. "Adam Whitaker." "That's nice." Mary nodded with the solemnity of someone making an important assessment. "My last name's Carter. Mary Rose Carter." She swung her feet gently. "Mom says I look like you. I don't know. I think I look like me." Something cracked deep in Adam's chest, not breaking, but shifting, like ice beginning to thaw. He'd spent decades building walls, and this child had simply walked around them. "Mary," he managed, his voice unsteady. "What? What did your mother tell you?" "That you're my dad, but you didn't know about me." She stated this as simple fact, without accusation. She said that sometimes people don't know important things, and that doesn't make them bad, just confused. Mary unwrapped her cookie, chocolate chip, he noticed, and broke it carefully in half. "She also said you probably needed time to understand. Do you need time?" Adam looked at this small, impossibly wise person who'd just walked into his life carrying a cookie and a truth he'd spent years running from. Did he need time? He'd had years. Years of choosing conference calls over connection, contracts over conversation, empire building over the simple human act of being known. "I think," he said slowly, "I've had too much time. Time to do everything except the things that mattered." Mary considered this, taking a small bite of her cookie half. "Mom says it's never too late if you're brave enough." She pushed the other half of the cookie toward him. "Are you brave?" The question hung in the air between them, impossibly large for such a small voice to carry. Before Adam could answer, a woman approached, worry written across her face, breathless and apologetic. "Mary, sweetheart, I told you to wait by the door." She looked at Adam, her expression shifting to concern. "I'm so sorry, sir." She saw you sitting here and just took off. No. Adam stood quickly, too quickly, his hand raised as if to stop an apology he couldn't bear to accept. Please, don't apologize. He looked at Mary, who watched him with those impossibly honest eyes. She's been extraordinary. The woman's tension eased slightly, though questions still lived in her face. I'm Claire. I'm Mary's aunt. Her mother asked me to bring her by today. She thought— Claire glanced at Mary, then back to Adam. She thought Mary should meet you first, before anything complicated. Mary slid down from the booth and walked around the table. Without warning, without asking permission, she wrapped her small arms around Adam's waist. The hug lasted maybe 5 seconds, but it reached somewhere Adam had forgotten existed. Some locked room inside himself, where he'd stored everything he'd convinced himself he didn't need. Love. Family. The simple grace of being chosen. When Mary pulled back, she looked up at him. I'm glad I was brave enough to talk to you. Will you be brave enough to stay? Then she took Claire's hand and walked toward the door, turning once to wave with her cookie-free hand. Adam stood very still after they left. The gray afternoon had shifted without his noticing. The sky lighter now, or maybe it was just his eyes adjusting to seeing things differently. The cafe no longer felt like a refuge from his life. It felt like the place where his life had finally begun. He pulled out his phone, hands not quite steady, and scrolled through contacts he hadn't looked at in years. Sophie Carter. The name glowed on the screen. A door he'd closed so long ago he'd almost forgotten it existed. When had he last called her? Not with lawyers or questions about the past, but really called, really listened, really showed up. He pressed dial. The phone rang once, twice. Adam? Sophie's voice carried surprise, wariness, and something else. Something that sounded almost like hope, held very carefully, afraid to break. I met her, Adam said, his voice barely above a whisper. I met Mary and Sophie. He stopped, searching for words that could carry the weight of what he felt. I need to understand what I walked away from. I need to know if I can— If you can what? Sophie asked gently. If I can learn to be the father she deserves, the man I should have been. There was a long pause. Adam could hear Sophie breathing, could almost feel her weighing his words against years of absence, against promises he'd never made and wounds he'd never acknowledged. Finally, she spoke. Then, you start by showing up, Adam, not when it's convenient, not when the board meeting ends. You show up because she matters more than everything else. I will, Adam said, and meant it with a certainty that surprised him. I promise I will. When the call ended, Adam remained at the table, his hand resting on the wood where Mary's cookie half still waited. The rain that had threatened all afternoon finally began, soft drops against the window, washing the world clean. And for the first time in more years than he could count, Adam Whitaker felt something stir inside the carefully maintained emptiness of his life. Not guilt, not obligation. Something far more dangerous and far more necessary. The rain picked up outside, and Adam found himself staring at the space where Mary had stood, seeing something else entirely. Someone else. 26 years ago, he'd walked into the same office building every morning with a hunger that felt like ambition, but might have been desperation. He was 26 then, junior analyst, nobody special, convinced that nobody special was a condition he could outwork, outsmart, outlast. Sophie Carter worked 3 floors down in client services. He noticed her in the elevator one Tuesday morning, the way she hummed softly to herself, how she smiled at strangers like it cost nothing to be kind. He'd thought it strange at first, that effortless warmth. In his world, everything had a cost. "You look like you're carrying the weight of empires," she'd said to him one day. Those same honest eyes, Mary's eyes, studying him with gentle amusement. "Just trying to build one," he'd replied. She'd laughed. "You know empires fall, right? Maybe try building something that lasts instead." He hadn't understood what she meant. Not then. Their relationship grew quietly, in stolen lunch hours and late evenings, when ambition finally released its grip on his throat long enough to breathe. Sophie was soft where the world was hard. She believed you could succeed without sacrificing your soul, that winning and kindness weren't opposing forces. She'd trace patterns on his shoulder in the dark and tell him about the life she imagined. Messy, full, human. Adam had listened and told himself it was beautiful but impractical. Love was a distraction. Success required singular focus. Then the promotion came. Senior vice president. New city, new life. The ladder had finally bent down low enough for him to grab the next rung, but only if he climbed immediately, climbed alone, climbed without looking back. "Come with me," he'd said to Sophie, though even as the words left his mouth, he knew he didn't mean them. Not really. They were the words you said to soften the blow of what came next. "Adam?" She'd taken his hands, her voice steady despite the tears. "I would follow you anywhere. But you're not asking me to come with you. You're asking me to watch you disappear into something that will never love you back. This is my shot, Sophie. I can't, I won't let it pass. I'm not asking you to let it pass. I'm asking you not to let us pass." Her grip tightened. "You matter to me. Not what you accomplish, not the title or the salary. You, the man who still remembers to laugh. Don't trade that away." But he had already decided. Had decided weeks before. Maybe. Had convinced himself that her love was a beautiful trap that would keep him ordinary forever. He'd left on a Wednesday. Never looked back. Told himself it was kindness. Clean breaks hurt less. Built his empire on the foundation of that lie and called it sacrifice when the walls started closing in. What he didn't know, what he couldn't have known because he'd made himself unknowable, was that Sophie was pregnant, that she'd discovered it 2 weeks after he left, that she'd raised their daughter alone, working double shifts and singing the same soft songs she used to hum in elevators, building something that lasted while Adam built something that gleamed. "I didn't know." The words came out barely audible, more breath than sound. Adam blinked, the cafe coming back into focus. Mary stood beside his table again. When had she returned, watching him with that impossible combination of wisdom and innocence? "I know," Mary said quietly, and her small hand found his on the table. "That's why Mom said I should be brave first. She said you probably needed someone to find you before you could find your way back." Adam's throat closed. 26 years of running, and it took a 6-year-old to finally catch him. "Your mother said that?" Mary nodded. "She says lots of people get lost. But lost doesn't mean gone forever. It just means somebody needs to go looking." The simplicity of it broke something fundamental inside him. The last defense. The final wall. Outside, the rain fell steady and clean. Inside, Adam Whitaker began the long work of finding his way home. The call came 2 days later. after Adam had rewritten the same text message 17 times and deleted it 16. Finally, he'd simply pressed dial, heart hammering like he was 26 again, and everything still felt possible. "I saw her," he had said when Sophie answered. The silence stretched long enough that Adam wondered if she'd hung up. Then, quietly, "I know. Would you meet me? Just to talk?" Another pause. Riverside Park, Saturday, 2 o'clock. She'd hung up before he could thank her. The park sat quiet that afternoon, autumn pulling the last warmth from the air. Adam arrived early, pacing near the bench Sophie had specified, running through speeches he knew would sound hollow the moment he opened his mouth. Then he saw her. Sophie Carter walked toward him with the kind of steady grace that only comes from carrying weight long enough to learn how to balance it. She wore jeans and a simple gray sweater, her hair pulled back, and though 26 years had passed, Adam recognized her immediately. Not just her face, but the way she moved, purposeful, grounded, present. But something had shifted. The softness he remembered had been tempered into something stronger. Not hardness, strength. The difference between bending and breaking. "Sophie." "Adam." She sat on the bench, leaving space between them. Not hostile, but bounded, clear. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Adam said the only true thing he could think of. "I'm sorry." Sophie looked at him, and her eyes carried the weight of years he hadn't been there to share. "For which part? Leaving, not calling? Or not knowing you had a daughter?" "All of it," his voice cracked. "Every single choice that led to Mary growing up without me." Sophie's expression softened, but only slightly. "I'm not going to tell you it was fine, Adam. It wasn't. There were nights I worked 2 shifts and came home so tired I could barely stand. And Mary would ask why other kids had dads, and she didn't." She paused, her hands folded in her lap. "But I also won't tell you it was all suffering. Because she's extraordinary, funny and brave and so full of love it terrifies me sometimes." "She has your eyes," Adam said quietly. "Your honesty. And your stubbornness." Sophie almost smiled. She decided she wanted to meet you, and nothing I said could talk her out of it. Said she needed to know who you were, not who I told her you were. Adam felt something twist in his chest. "What did you tell her about me?" "The truth. That you were ambitious, that you chose a different path, that you didn't know about her, and that didn't make you evil, just absent." Sophie's gaze held his. "I never poisoned her against you, Adam. That wouldn't have served either of us. I don't deserve that, Grace. This isn't about what you deserve. It's about what Mary needs." Sophie's voice carried the weight of every decision she'd made alone. "I'm tired, Adam. Tired of being both parents. Tired of shouldering everything. But I'm also terrified of letting someone in who might disappear again when things get hard." Before Adam could respond, a small voice called out, "Mom!" Mary ran across the grass, her pink coat bright against the gray afternoon. She threw herself into Sophie's arms, and Sophie caught her with the practiced ease of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. Mary's small hand found Sophie's instinctively, holding tight. Then Mary turned to Adam, her expression suddenly serious. "Are you my dad?" The question hung in the autumn air, simple and impossible. Adam looked at Sophie, then back at Mary. He knelt down slowly, meeting her at eye level. "If you want me to be," he said carefully, each word carrying the weight of a promise he was terrified of breaking, "I would like to try, truly." Mary studied him with those impossibly honest eyes. Trying is the most important part." Sophie watched this exchange, her hand still holding Mary's, her expression unreadable. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet, but firm enough to carry the foundation of everything that would follow. "Then you start by showing up, Adam. Not when it's convenient, not when it fits your schedule. You show up because she's more important than anything else you'll ever build." Adam met her eyes and saw the test beneath the words. Not cruelty, but protection. The fierce guardianship of someone who'd already rebuilt a life from the rubble he'd left behind. "I will," he said. "I promise I will." Sophie nodded slowly, and though trust didn't arrive in that moment, the door opened just wide enough to let possibility through. "Then we'll see," she said. The first school pickup felt like walking onto a stage where everyone knew the script except him. Adam arrived 15 minutes early, parked across the street, and watched other parents gather by the gate. Easy conversations, familiar faces, the casual choreography of people who belonged. When the bell rang and children spilled out like confetti, he saw Mary scanning the crowd. Her face lit up when she spotted him. "You came!" She ran to him, backpack bouncing. "I said I would." Adam knelt down, eye level. "I'll always come when I say I will." Mary took his hand, casually, as if she'd done it 100 times before, and led him toward the parking lot. Other parents watched. Adam felt their curiosity like weight. "That's my dad," Mary announced to a little boy passing by, and the casualness of it nearly broke him. Mary's world was nothing like boardrooms. She introduced him to things he'd forgotten existed. Crayons that smelled like fruit. Cartoons about talking animals who solved problems with teamwork. Picture books where the words rhymed and the lessons were simple. She showed him how to build block towers the right way, and taught him that playground slides were best experienced with arms raised high. Adam learned to sit cross-legged on the floor, his expensive suit pants creasing, and to listen, really listen, to stories about classroom drama and who shared their snack and why butterflies have patterns on their wings. He learned to laugh without checking his watch first. One evening, while coloring a dragon purple because dragons can be any color they want, Mary looked up at him. "Do you get lonely?" Adam's hand paused mid-stroke. "Yes," he said quietly. "I do." "Me too, sometimes." Mary added orange spots to the dragon's wings. "Even when Mom's there. Is that weird?" "No, sweetheart. I think everyone feels that way sometimes." Another day, during a walk to get ice cream. "Why did you leave my mom?" Adam had known this question would come, had rehearsed answers. All of them felt insufficient now. "I was scared," he said finally. "I thought if I stayed, I'd never become the person I wanted to be. But I was wrong. I became successful, but I forgot how to be human." Mary licked her strawberry cone thoughtfully. "Are you human now?" "I'm learning to be again. You're teaching me." "Are you happy now?" She asked this while they sat on a park bench watching ducks paddle across the pond. Adam considered lying, offering the easy answer, but Mary deserved more than easy. "I'm happier than I've been in a long time," he said, "but I'm also sad about the years I missed. Both things can be true at once." Mary nodded, processing this. "Mom says that too, that things can be happy and sad together." The changes bled into everything. At work, Adam started learning names, not just of executives, but of people he'd walked past for years. The night security guard was Robert. He had 3 grandchildren. The junior analyst was Priya. She was studying for her MBA at night. He held open-door sessions, asking questions he'd never thought to ask before. Are you okay? What do you need? How can I help? His assistant noticed. You're different, she said one morning, not accusatory, just observing. I'm trying to be, Adam replied. The art show happened on a Thursday evening, Mary's classroom displaying student work in the school cafeteria. Adam arrived early, found Mary's painting of my family. 3 figures, one tall, one medium, one small, all holding hands, and felt his throat tighten. Mary ran up to him, pulling Sophie behind her. You came to both things this week. I'll come to everything I can, Adam said. That's what showing up means. Then, without warning or fanfare, Mary wrapped her arms around his waist and held on. Not because he'd asked, not because it was expected, but because she wanted to. The hug lasted maybe 10 seconds. Adam's eyes burned. His chest ached. He didn't sob or collapse, nothing dramatic. But something inside him, quietly, irrevocably, broke open. The kind of breaking that lets light in. When Mary pulled back, she smiled up at him. I'm glad you're learning to be human again. Me too, Adam whispered. Me too. Sophie watched from 3 feet away, her expression unreadable but softening. Not trust yet, perhaps, but something close, something that looked almost like hope, beginning to believe in itself. 3 months later, Adam stood in Sophie's kitchen helping wash dishes after dinner, something he'd done every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 8 weeks. It wasn't grand. It wasn't dramatic. It was showing up. You don't have to do that, Sophie said, drying a plate. I know. Adam rinsed another glass. But I want to. Sophie smiled, a real smile this time, the kind that reached her eyes. You've been consistent. I didn't think that I could be, Adam finished gently. That you would choose to be. She set the plate down. But you have. Every pickup, every dinner, every art show. You've been here. In the living room, Mary hummed while building a blanket fort, her voice carrying the same unconscious melody Sophie used to hum in elevators 26 years ago. The sound filled the house with something Adam had forgotten could exist. Peace that didn't require silence. I missed so much, Adam said quietly. I can't get those years back. No, Sophie agreed. But you can be here for the years ahead. That's what matters now. Later that evening, after Mary had gone to bed, Sophie made tea and they sat at the kitchen table, not as strangers anymore, not as lovers, but as 2 people learning to build something neither had words for yet. Co-parents, friends, maybe eventually something more. But for now, this was enough. Thank you, Adam said, for letting me try. Sophie reached across the table, her hand briefly touching his. Thank you for actually showing up. The following Tuesday morning, Adam arrived at Sophie's apartment at 7:30. Mary opened the door, backpack already on, lunchbox in hand. Ready? Adam asked. Ready. She took his hand without hesitation. They walked the 4 blocks to Riverside Elementary, through a morning that smelled like autumn leaves and possibility. Other kids waved. Mary waved back. A parent Adam had met at the art show nodded in greeting. He belonged here now, in this small daily ritual that meant everything. At the school gate, Mary stopped and looked up at him, her small hand still wrapped around his. I'm glad I was brave, she said, her voice carrying the kind of certainty that only truth possesses. Adam knelt down, eye level with his daughter, and felt the weight of everything he'd almost lost, everything he'd finally found. Me too, he said softly. Me too. Mary hugged him quickly, then ran toward her classroom, turning once to wave before disappearing inside. Adam stood there, watching until she was gone, feeling the morning sun warm on his face. His phone buzzed. Work emails. Board meeting in an hour. Contracts to review. The empire still needed tending. But as Adam walked back toward his car, he realized something fundamental had shifted. The empire no longer owned him. Success no longer defined him. Somewhere between a cafe encounter and learning to sit cross-legged on the floor, between answered questions and quiet consistency, he'd discovered what wealth actually meant. It wasn't the corner office or the stock portfolio or the reputation that opened doors. It was Mary's hand in his on Tuesday mornings. It was Sophie's slowly returning trust. It was belonging to something smaller than an empire, but infinitely more valuable. A family learning to build itself from broken pieces and brave choices. Adam climbed into his car and sat for a moment, letting the morning settle around him. Somewhere across town, a cafe was opening its doors, brewing coffee, arranging tables. Maybe someone sat alone there now, staring out the window, waiting for something they didn't know they needed. He hoped they found it. He hoped someone walked up to them with a simple truth and a generous heart. He hoped they were brave enough to let themselves be found. Because sometimes healing doesn't arrive like thunder, with grand gestures and dramatic pronouncements. Sometimes it sits down quietly across from you in a cafe, holding a cookie, and asks if you're okay. Sometimes it takes the shape of a 6-year-old girl who sees through walls you spent decades building. Sometimes it looks like an ordinary Tuesday morning, walking hand in hand toward a place called home.